not gonna do that.
Welcome to this chilly afternoon, to your board meeting. We have just lunch and we have some brownies there that suit you. Hope you're feeling better. Nice to see you made it today and all that. So we have a guest speaker with us today. His name is Brian Yeagerlinger. And you will want to listen carefully as Brian gets ready to share with us.
I'm not set up yet. I need to plug in my.
Well, he'll be ready in a few moments, all right? So, in the meantime, enjoy his brownies that he brought along, so. Do we get to have something to drink as well?
Is it this cord right here?
Yes.
So,
Oh, I
is
need
the
a drink
projector
too.
even on?
I am ready for some lunch.
Thank you, Coach Ryder. Where's the projector? This one?
Thank you, Nathan.
You're welcome.
I'll need
I
a
saw
napkin too. Or maybe I should have Dakota pour my drink.
It's all right, it's okay. I can do that.
Okay.
Saying all I'm saying, Ms. Todd.
No, I'm saying between you and I trying to do
Thanks,
this.
I appreciate that CP notice.
I'm talking too much about the cast, and if you wiggle and I miss it, we're in bad shape.
She's getting, she's telling me about my CP issue, it's all right.
Can you
I just
all
didn't know if you wanted
see?
to.
Yeah.
Okay.
How much
How much
you want?
Joel, you okay, like where you're at? I hope, I'm not like back away, but like I have to have this.
How much do you want?
There.
Just all the way to the top, almost?
Now, but see, now my problem is, can I carry it?
You got it, nice.
Presentation.
Thank you.
I actually did start shaking. Not gonna lie.
All right, Mr. Yeagerlinger, we're ready when you are.
Yep, just
And
got-
to the board that's here listening, it will be important that if you have questions, you jot them down so we can ask him as we progress.
Okay, I'm gonna have a question for you all once I get this set up about how I'll be presenting this when it is finally set up. Alright, okay. So, quick question, how do I switch over from
There's a button called two. Click that.
on the front?
Yeah, it should be.
Let's see if I can.
Thanks, Dakota.
There's
You threw me for a loop,
monitor
I'm glad
and
you did.
there's monitor and projector.
Click monitor, I think.
I didn't know if you could carry it coming.
No, I'm glad you did that, but if I walked in, I'm like, I sure hope they picked that up.
Yeah, I changed it. Oh, no, it's what, I got it, I figured it out.
Got it?
Hopefully, it went on the switch.
There you go, it worked. That's fine.
Okay, now, because I'm gonna have to switch back between the virtual machine I have and this, are you all okay with it being like this and not totally full screen, just so it'll be easier to switch back? Can you all see this perfectly fine?
Sure. That
Okay,
works.
good. Now, before I get started, the 10 questions I have in front of you, a lot of them are on your brochure. Hint, hint. Yes, Ms.
Do you have any, do I get to look at any?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. This is the very information. There's only about 4 sheets of paper.
Okay.
But the notes, if you needed notes on what I had,
Okay.
different things I was doing. And then these
Okay.
are the questions, but for you, I also have
Oh, good, thank you.
answer sheet as well.
Mhm.
Now, involving the 10 questions you all have, a lot of them can't, pretty much all of them I will be saying out loud, and I will make very, very clear that I'm like making a point. Also, a lot of them can be found also on your brochure as to incentivize you to look through it. There's a lot of information on it, as you'll soon discover with Arch. Now with my presentation, I originally wasn't supposed to do Arch. I was supposed to be doing Solaris, but as Ms. Todd will tell you as well, we had a lot of issues with that. So I decided, why not go for something even more difficult, more challenging, and has even more stuff in it. And that is Arch Linux. And I like to call it the ultimate DIY system, the do-it-yourself operating system, because you literally choose, build, and troubleshoot it yourself. And Google is your friend, as we all know, and I mean, we're all IT majors, right? So as we go down here, so what exactly is Arch? Arch is a rolling release. Unlike other distros that are stable releases or releases that come out every 3 months, 6 months, or a year, Arch is a rolling release. Therefore, whenever a package or something is updated, it will immediately be put into its repositories or into the base operating system itself, and it will be rolled out. You know, as the word kind of says, rolling release. It is a kind of build your own system. It was meant to kind of allow you to make it what you want. You kind of build every aspect of it from the ground up, and it's kind of based off of later on, I'll kind of explain this too, it's kind of how you would work with FreeBSD or Slackware. Basically the ISO, or the installation file, is built out of little tiny blocks, and you're building a structure out of it. And so you have to do every little detail about it, and that's what makes it kind of unique compared to other distros. It really isn't, oh, what comes out of the box, you decide it. Now, of course, with what is Arch, so what comprises the ISO? Because we all know, like, every user is going to build a different version of it. So what comes with the ISO, it is based on C and C++, as most operating systems are, because it's a really low-level programming language, and it's under, like, about 99.9% Linux operating systems. It is under the GNU public license, or the GNU public license or general public license, and that just means that you can edit it, you can look at the source code, you can roll out your own version of Arch, which I don't see how you can really roll out your own. Maybe change the ISO, I guess, but it basically says you can do whatever you want with it. And the file structure comes out of the box. What it comes in is extended 3, so it's ext3. And something that I really found out was really interesting, I heard a lot of time, like, Arch is for servers. It's only for servers. It'd be perfect. I mean, you can build what you want. You can choose what you want your server to do. Well, because it's a rolling release where it gets all these up-to-date packages, and though you can make it only have stable packages, because it's a rolling release, it's actually not used in the server market a whole lot. I was a little bit shocked by that because I went into this thinking it was for servers. But the main market where this is at is in the custom desktop market. You build it yourself, and it's mainly for general user use. Now, a little bit of history. Now, the history is also on, I believe, your brochures as well, but I'll just kind of go over a little bit with you guys. Arch doesn't have a whole lot of history just because there haven't really been significant changes, because the base ISO, I think over 60% of its code was actually from, a large amount of it was from 2002 anyway. It's been kept over all these years. The first release was in March 11th of 2002, and it was released by a Canadian programmer. I don't know if it's Judd, I wanted to say Judd, but it's probably Jude, because it's French Canadian, Jude the Net. And the base code, like I said before, it's not based off of BSD's code, so don't get the wrong idea there. It's built like it. So instead of being one large file, it's built into smaller blocks that you reference to and install. And we'll get more into that as I go during the installation part later on. Now Jude the Net, he wanted to create an OS that was really similar to BSD, but he wanted to make it really up to date. And so he actually created the Pacman package manager. And that is the one that comes by default, and we'll go a little bit more into package managing later. But he wanted to create an operating system that was very high-tech, high-release, and so that's what he based it off of, but still wanted to make it customizable like BSD. Now 2005, this was the biggest turning point and probably the godsend for Arch Linux installs, because that was when the Arch Wiki was formed. Because as we all know, like, we all can Google everything, but it can be a little bit of a daunting task. So the community all came together, and in 2005 they created the Arch Wiki, which is the largest Linux forum. This is a single Linux forum currently on the internet right now, and it has from everything from installation to all of the like 58 million packages that it has, and every individual package, you can find info about everything. In fact, everything I did on this presentation was from the Arch Wiki. It's like the Bible for Arch Linux. But that wasn't all. In 2005, we had a double hitter. In 2005, the AUR was created, the Arch User Repository, because Pacman is up to date. Pacman is normally up to date, but the community wanted to be more involved. They wanted to make it a simple process, and they wanted to have more control. So they're like, why don't we just make our own repository? And so they did. They created the Arch User Repository. It does not come by default. And the reason for that is because not every package is stable. They wanted, but it is an option, and most of the time, it's about 98% of the time, we're going to use it because you get all the software you want. And that gives you access to all the millions of packages in the Arch Wiki and the Arch user repository. And so that was like the biggest turning point in making Arch very popular. Now, 2006, and it's not just coincidence that after it became popular, the first Arch-based distros were released. Now there are the first four that were released are on your brochures. I won't go over them too much because they aren't active anymore. If they were active, I would have went over them. But currently, in the top 10 are Linux-based distributions used today, Manjaro and Antergos, or Antergos, however you want to pronounce it. They're in the top 10, and they are both based on Arch. And they're basically just Arch graphical installers. They're very, very popular. And really the last thing that really significantly happened in the last couple of years was 2012, Systemd was adopted as the display manager. Now, for all of you that don't know what a display manager is, if you all have installed Windows for the first time, which I'm pretty sure we all have for our systems, and like the resolution isn't scaled properly, it's because it's using a VISA driver. Before we install NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel drivers, so it's like the screen's like really bloated and the resolution's not right. Well, that's what a display manager is. A display manager allows you to have some graphics so you can install better graphics drivers later on. And before, they were using something called Xorg, and for Linux users, Xorg is very old and very bloated, and it is still very old and bloated. Systemd, unfortunately, is now becoming very old and very bloated, so we'll see where they go in the future, but nothing really much has happened since with Arch. It's just kind of kept on rolling, as it were. Now here comes the fun part, in about 70% of this presentation, and that is the installation. As you can see here, from left to right, these are all the steps for installing a working Arch Linux install. In fact, the Arch Wiki, which I will go to at the end of this to kind of reference, the Arch Wiki only shows you how to install the base package, and not even adding a user, a GUI, your own GUI package manager. That is like all over here. There are many steps you have to follow, and I'm going to start going into those steps right now. And now, do not be surprised if about nearly everything I'm going to tell you is going to go over your head, because like it did with me, it's going to. It took me about an hour and 35 minutes to get a working install of Arch. I failed about 15 times before I officially got a working step. So here are the major installation steps. I will go more into setting up your partitions and stuff a little bit later, and I'll show you how to do it. It's actually pretty cool. But you have to do everything. So first you have to make sure that you have a connection to the internet. I mean, you don't have to, but it makes the job a lot easier. And by doing that, you would do a ping command, ping, then Google. I usually ping Google. It's like ping www.google.com. And then you would set up all of your partitions, which I'll go into that in more detail there because there's a whole slide about it. And then you would set your partition tables, and so you have control over that as well. You're given the option to go with a DOS or I think MDOS style partitioning table. It gives you two options. I always go with DOS because it's the first option, a lot easier. And then you have to mount them. So after you set up your partition, it's not just going to automatically mount it for you. You got to mount it. And then you have to install the base packages, which is about 150 megabytes in size, only about 150 megabytes to 200 megabytes. But then you have to do something that's really fun, and this is where I'm actually going to show you a little bit, and just to be sure that I don't mess up the syntax of it. Wait, no, I do have it. I'm going to go to my virtual machine. That for some reason is, well, hold on a second, guys. I apologize. For some reason, I lost my display for it. I'll boot it up again real fast. Cross fingers. It'd be really convenient for it to not work on the one day that I actually need to. So and then the lovely name tester. Now, so as you can see, I do have a GUI. When you install Arch, you will not have a GUI. You have to install it, and I'll go a little bit more into that later, because a lot of people are confused when they see an Arch install. It's like, why do you have a GUI? And it's like, well, you have to do it yourself. And so I have two different terminals. So I left off where you have to select your install mirrors. Your install mirrors are basically the servers around the world. There's over 540 of them. And you have to basically pick which ones you want. Being in the United States, you probably don't want servers in China or in Russia because they're probably very, 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 very slow. And so to access that, if I can remember, I'm pretty sure I do. Go, it is located in Pacman. And Nano is your friend, by the way. So Google and Nano are your
Okay,
friends.
could you tell us what you typed? It's a little hard to see.
Yeah, I apologize for the weird text. So to your mirror list, a list of all your servers and their IP and everything is located in the dash Etsy folder, which we're going to be in the Etsy folder a lot in this. Etsy folder / pacmand. So your package manager, 'cause that's where you're going to get packages and stuff. And then mirror list. And of course, to access it, you have to be in sudo. And here are all the mirror lists. So you probably can't see it because, yeah, because it's a little bit over, but it says United States here. And I only chose United States. But when you first install Arch, you're gonna have over 540 of them. And so I went through individually and cut each of the ones that I did not want in there. And then you're left with just these. Now you don't have to tell, you can tell it like, oh, get from this server, but in all actuality, it does it automatically for you. So if you leave it with a few US servers, it'll check which one's the fastest. And so that's how you would check your mirror list. Now I'll go back to the presentation here. Then you have to set a time zone. I was gonna show that, but I've already set it, so it's gonna give me an error. But we will go over in the Arch Wiki how the commands for that. Now then you have to do, after you set your time zone of where you're at, it can't just say, oh, well, you're in the US, and we'll get English and this layout of keyboard for you. I wish it would do that, but unfortunately you have to do it yourself. You have to actually set the locale, which is like your culture, I guess, is what it kind of is referencing to locale, and then you have to generate it. So it generates what language it is, what fonts you use, and basically you would go through an entire list and pick which one you are. So for us it'd be United States. English United States would be that one. Then after that, you still aren't done. Unfortunately, we're a little far from done. You then have to create a host name and set your IP address because you can't connect to a network without host name and IP address. And I wish I would have brought that up here, but I'm afraid I forgot to bring it up here with me. Oh well, it's fine. I can show you all afterwards if you want to ask me that. And then you have to set a password and a user. I think for hostname, actually, I will try to show you that. Okay, never mind. I actually can show you. I pulled a blonde moment, guys. So yeah, okay, the projector is a little bit off. I can't really show you guys unless well, I'm an idiot. I can move it over for you guys. Can you all see? No, I don't want to go full screen. Trying to watch this as I go. Okay, can you all sort of see what it's saying a little bit? We all good?
If you read it to us, we can.
Okay, I'll read it off a little bit. So basically, to create a host name, you will create a file in Etsy. Etsy is where all of your configuration folders are. You'll be in it a lot. You're going to be creating a file called host. Now, Arch will automatically look for a file called host. So it's like you don't have to make it and then tell it to do it. It automatically knows what host is. Now, every machine by default comes with an IP address, and the way I have it set up is that on a virtual machine, the IP address is always the same. It's always 127 point whatever, and you would put your IP there for local host. So your host is going to use this IP, this extension of the IP for this local host. and then finally you put your IP address. Now I call my host name, I will go to host name and show you how to do that one. My host name, I just call it local admin, just a simple, local administrator. Local admin, and then local domain, so it says that this admin or this host has this domain, and then whenever you want something to be referenced, so like I put local admin, this, and then local admin is like all of this will go to your host name. And for host name, let me go to host name. There it is. And then for host name, literally all you're going to put in there is whatever you want the name of your host to be. It's that simple. And then when you make your host, which is the file I just showed you, you would put that in place of like local. So I have local admin. Local admin has this domain, local admin. So host name, what you want, and then to seal it, you put the name of the host. Hopefully that wasn't too complicated, but that's the way Arch is, unfortunately. And so after you have connected to the internet, you've got your IP address, well now you have to set a password, it doesn't come with a root password by default, but you're logged in as root during the installation because you have no users yet. And so when you're logged in as root and you set a password, it's setting a password for root. And you would just do pswd and then click it. But you can't do the command now because I'm logged in as the actual user. But you would type that in, and then you would set your root password, and then reboot your system. Now after you reboot, you still don't have a user yet. Unfortunately, you do not have a user. And so you'll then have to create one, but not until you do something that I kept forgetting to do every single time until literally this install right here. You have to install something called a bootloader. And have any of you ever heard of Grub? Yeah, my Linux person does. So a bootloader is like, if you have like two operating systems on one drive, it'll bring up basically a black screen and be like, oh, do you want to boot into your Windows drive or do you want to boot into your Linux drive? And for the longest time, I did not know that you were supposed to install one of those. And so you install Grub using Pacman, and I'll show you how to install stuff later on, but you would basically install whatever bootloader you want. And the Arch Wiki, if you search for bootloader in the Arch Wiki, you'll find a whole slew of them. The old legacy ones, newer ones, and just whatever you want, and then gives you instructions of how to install it. Now for adding a user, because you want it to be where you log into the computer, I'm just assuming that, you would do a cool command, pretty simple, it's called user add. I'm not going to add a user because I'm currently am a user, but you would use the command user add, press enter, and then you would type in the username, and you've got a user. And of course the user doesn't have a password. It doesn't have anything. All you've got is just a user. So to make a password for a user, you do pswd. Let me enlarge this so I think we can see just a little bit better. Actually, it doesn't enlarge it.
Is there a setting under view up there?
Um,
Do you have a view option? No, I meant on that other screen. It looked like maybe
Oh,
the third
here?
one over was view.
Oh, here?
No.
On the terminal.
Oh, the terminal, it won't, I can scale it up, but it'll keep the same text.
Okay.
Well, I'll write it out. It is, do you want me to write it out?
You
Would
can
that be-
if you like.
Very, very simple. To create a password for anything, it's a simple command. You don't even have to use sudo for it. So you do pswd, and then whatever the name of your user is. So my user, when I did it, I tester. That was the name of the user. And then and it would ask you, what password do you want? You would type in your password, and then when you press enter, it'd be like, oh, retype it so I know what it is. This is standard procedure. And now you have a user, and you have a password for it. But the problem is the user doesn't have access to anything. So what we call this is groups. If you all are in Windows, you all know documents, downloads, videos, like favorites folders and things like that. Well, Windows automatically knows how to do that for you. In Arch, you have to basically say, okay, this user, so tester, he needs to have access to documents. He needs to have access to these folders. Well, to do that, all you would do is you would have, well, I'll just write it out for you guys, just to make it easier. You use the command user mod. So you are modifying the user and their permissions of what they can do. And then, now I looked this up and I still do not know what that means in the Arch Wiki. They never explain what AG means. I could, I'll make sure, I'll try to look that up later, but I could never find out what that meant. Access granted? Okay, that makes actually a lot of sense. Thank you. Access group, it makes, access, well, no, because groups are over here. Access granted. It could mean that. It didn't say that when I looked it up. Well, thank you. I now know that.
Well, we don't know, do we know that for sure?
I was
Or are you guessing?
It makes sense. I'll have to make sure I look that up later because I can never find that. But basically you would have user mod, so you are modifying the user, probably granting access of some kind, and then you're going to put what groups you want. Well, so say you have an optical drive plugged in your computer, you want them to have the ability to use optical. Say you want access to the hard drive, you would give them access to storage. And say you want them to have access to video, like your graphics card and things of that nature, you would put video. If you want access to documents and so on and so forth, you would list out the group names. Now, whenever you are modifying a user, whenever you are doing that to a user, a specific user, you have to tell it what user you want to modify it to, or else it doesn't know. It's just going to be like, well, I can't modify it if I don't know. You would then put the username at the very, very end. Anytime, now this is just a break I put in there to show separation. You wouldn't actually put that there. But after you would put in your groups, you put a space, and then type in your username, and then your user will be added to those groups. And so now whenever you go to your file manager, I'll bring that up. In fact, I'll bring it up now. Your user can actually have access to, say, documents, images, audio. Now, of course, I didn't list out every group because there's a lot of them, but I had to go in manually and add in videos, audio files, images, and things of that nature to create a folder for the user to access. And so basically that technically, according to the Arch Wiki, is all you have to do to install Arch. But of course, as you can see, I have a handy dandy GUI, and that'll be towards the end when I go into GUI. But I did mention that I was going to go over the file structure and doing stuff of that nature. Well, Arch, and you're going to hear me say this pretty much every slide, it is your choice on everything. And so the file structure, whenever you are installing Arch, you have, if you have hard drives plugged in, the way you can see them is by a command called cfdisk. Actually, I need to use sudo. cfdisk. And what this will do, and just type out the command, it's literally just cfdisk. And what this will do, well, it'll bring up all your drives. A virtual machine, I've only got one drive. The name of your drive, or how it's identified, normally will always be a dev, SDA most of the time. And as you can see, it has a little asterisk under boot. Whenever you create a partition, which by creating a partition, let's say I wanted to create a partition in this drive, I would click enter, and then give you an option. Do you want to create a new partition? Do you want it to be a primary, which is what you boot off of? As you can see, this one is bootable. I went over here to the bootable tab. Right here is called bootable, and this will allow it to be booted from, because you don't want every drive to be accessed at random on boot. So your primary drive, which this one is, I set it up, all I did was hit enter on boot, and it makes it bootable. And now originally, I used up all the drive when I created this. I should have made it bigger so I could have partitioned it, but I have very, very limited space. So I can only give 30 gigs to this whole partition. And so I just decided to use the whole thing, and when you click enter on it, it would say, do you want to use all this? You just click enter, enter, and then enter. That's literally how easy it is to make a partition. Because for the longest time, I thought that this was very difficult, but it's actually not too bad. And so knowing the name of your drive, /dev/SDA1, or whichever one it tells you, is very, very important, because then you have to mount the drive. Now to mount your drive, I think we went over this in our commands, but just a little reference, the drive when you create it, it's not mounted, so you have to mount / whatever your drive name is. So you would type out mount, your drive name, I think mine's called SDA1, and then mount. And now you can actually do things with it, because if it isn't mounted, you can't install packages, you can't modify anything, because you can't access the drive. And so just thought I wanted to go a little bit more in detail, because that's a very, very important step in Arch Linux, because you can't start it without having a drive to do anything with. Now, here comes the second part of this. You have to pick your file system. Once again, it is your choice. Arch Linux is, like all Linux, is compatible with almost any file system imaginable, including it can even modify and work with NTFS, which is very surprising. I thought that it was so proprietary, but it can actually read the drive and access files on it. Now, to make a file system is actually pretty darn easy. I'm going to have to just erase a little bit here. So to make a file system, and once again, you have to remember your drive name. It's called MKFS, or make a file system, and then whatever your hard drive is. Dev/SDA1, that is the name of my drive. Make file system dev, and then you would name off the file system. I've always known Linux to use ext4, so it was the only one I even knew, to be honest with you guys. Until recently, I didn't know there were so many file systems out in the world, and then just whatever the file system name you want. So make a file system to this drive and make it ext4. I hope you all can see from over there, but ext4 is the name of the file system you want to do. Now, the list here are the file system it supports by default. However, you do have the option, I didn't know this here, but F2FS and UDF and then BTRFS, file systems I've never even heard of, but they're actually optional. You can actually add support for even more file system types out there through the Arch Wiki. And as I mentioned, there are only two partitioning tables available, It is DOS and MS-DOS. So whenever so remember when I showed you all the disk that we had in the terminal, SDA1, it'll give you the option of what kind of partitioning table you want to use with it. I will always use DOS, just a little heads up, DOS is much easier to work with, because here you have to do modifications and stuff. Average user, DOS is like a standard. So this is where I'm going to kind of fly through a little bit. The process manager, network manager, and stuff like that, because they aren't you aren't going to use them very much, but I might as well mention them to you guys. The process manager literally is called PAM. Or process action modules. It's pretty cool, that's it. And now PAM is installed by default. It is a default application, and you will probably never, ever, ever use it in your life, because normally we all have computers that we don't care if there's a few background processes, but PAM can actually do quite a lot. You can actually set which applications you want to be priorities over other applications. You can make it to where your system will always favor essential processes over external, oh, I don't need this. And what's really cool, it does this very, very easily. What you'll do is, as you install applications, it'll automatically go to this folder, /etc/security/limits. Once again, in your Etsy folder, all your processes are going to be listed there. And what you can do is set them to soft or a hard limit. Now, a hard limit basically means you cannot mess with this. Do not do anything to it. You will always run it. I mean, unless there's really, really big limitations. But you will always run these processes. And then soft basically means it's fine. You know, if you need to reallocate resources, that's fine. Normally, we don't run into that, but if you're in like a server market and you like need your server to only run these things and be able to run everything, it can be efficient to use PAM. You can also set priorities for every single process you want. So like you can use I/O properties or inputs and outputs to your system. You can choose what is prioritized over other things. Your scheduled stuff, you can actually put stuff, sort of like how you would do startup applications or writing a script to schedule something. Our limit, basically this is limiting memory or system resources, resource limiting. And so you can choose how much how much resources an application will get. I didn't do a whole lot with PAM because I never had any really big use for it unless you're very specific. So I just thought I would throw that in there and mention. I think it is also on the brochure as well. Network Manager. Now, Arch does not, I repeat, hint, hint, does not come with a Network Manager by default. You actually have to install it manually yourself, and what's even better, it's very easy to know what it is. Network Manager is called Network Manager. There are no spaces, no caps, or nothing. Whenever you go to install a package, we'll show it later, when you install a package, that is literally what you will type, or what you will search for. Network Manager. Now what's interesting is that even without a Network Manager, you can still connect to the internet. I thought for the longest time that if you didn't have that, you can't connect. Well, you can by a command I'm going to show you. It's actually pretty cool because I'm going to have to download a package and show you how to do that later on. What you can do is use this command right here, DHCP. So you all probably heard of a DHCP server, basically assigning an IP. This command right here, I'll write out a little bit bigger. So DHCP-CD is basically telling the computer, get a static IP from the server we're connected to and put it on this drive. That's what CD means. So on the current drive, which is your primary drive. You're going to use this command, and then you're going to be using, since I'm on a virtual machine, it's mimicking an Ethernet connection. If you have an Ethernet connection, you're going to be doing this, and I'll be typing it in just a second. You're going to use the command ENP, which references a Ethernet or connected wired connection. And then after that, you would type in the last 3 digits of your IP. So for my system, the last 3 digits for my network domain, it is 30. My bad. Sorry, it's 0S3. And so let me show you how this works. It's pretty cool. So I would do sudo DHCP CD.
And the 0S3 is what?
So the 0S3 is the last 3 digits of my network domain. And so you would looked it up doing IP address search, and there's a general Linux command, and you would put the last 3 digits. It'll list out 3 different IP addresses that you have. So you have a wired IP, a DHCP IP, the static that comes with your computer, and you want to use, and I'll emphasize this, your static IP. Yeah, because a computer can have multiple IP addresses for like different connections. For a wired, you're always going to use your static one in the list that you are given. So as you can see, it's processing, and so it's looking for like your carrier. It's going to reach out through the wired. I mean, of course, laptop's Wi-Fi, but on the VM it's wired. And it's going out, it's going to the nearest server, which is our HLG, it's going to HLG, and then to whatever our internet provider is, getting an IP, and then giving it. Now that I have an IP, I now have access to the internet on this computer. Without your network manager, which I have, if you have to go even further, you have to manually connect every single time. I found that out when I tried to ping something and it would not work. You actually have to go into your terminal or into your package manager and actually install Network Manager to be able to connect automatically. Now, of course, I have Network Manager installed in the system, but I just wanted to show you guys the manual process, because I find it's actually pretty cool how it works, even though you have to do it manually. So that's Network Manager. Now, Device Manager, this is one that is very hard to access and that you really can't do a whole lot with unless you're very, very, very tech savvy and know about everything about Arch. It's something that's called UDEV. Now, UDEV is a device manager that communicates what? Oh, you're going to say something. Sorry, Joel. UDEV works directly with the kernel itself. It is built in by default. It is a default application. And there is one other device manager. It's called Device Mapper. Personally, I do not like it, but Device Mapper, if you've all, you all have worked, so like the device manager on Windows, like to look at all your stuff, how to list out everything. Device Mapper is similar to that, except it has a lot of errors and there can be problems with that. UDEV works on a terminal level and is so extremely advanced that really, even on the Arch Wiki, it recommends you never touch it in general. Because it kind of does its own little thing, and unless you really want to have like access to all your graphics cards, like say you're running like a mining server or something, I say a server, mining server, just a mining rig or something like that, or you want specific things to be done, then you use it. I have never touched it because I don't want to break anything, but there is a device manager by default that you can use if you are so inclined to do so. Now, here we go, back to the your choice moments. What file manager should you use? So you're installing a GUI. Well, what package manager, file manager, not package manager, file manager do you use? Well, to be honest, I didn't know they all had different names. I thought it was all the same package manager. I should have looked at how they looked. Now, as you notice with these, I put 4 here, and they each go by different names. This one's called Kaja or Kaja, or however you want to pronounce it. This is for GNOME. If you install the GNOME GUI, which I'll show you that one a little bit later, what it looks like. I think this one is Nautilus and Dolphin. I mean, they each have like their own looks and stuff. Now, if you install like GNOME, KDE, or whichever GUI you want to go with, it'll have its own file manager by default. So you normally don't have to choose this, but hey, if you want a different look, you can, and you know what the package manager is called, which normally they're just called this, except GNOME, GNOME file manager with dashes, and then you just install it and you get the look that you want. But it is your choice, whichever one you want. Now, package manager is your choice. Now as you probably heard, Arch comes with Pacman by default. Pacman is the default manager, and it's the coolest name ever for a package manager. It makes a lot of sense, Pacman. However, if you want software from any other location, you have the ability to add it. So like if you want, I believe if you even want Debian or Ubuntu stuff, you can get it on here. Questionable whether it'll work or not, but you do have the option to choose that. And here are just a few options of different package managers. I hope you can somewhat see what that is. If you all need to come up, you're more than welcome to. This is the package manager. It's it comes with KDE. It's called KGET. It's a really awkward name for it, but KDE kind of references it. And it has its own package style. I don't like it too much because, I'm more of the classic software center kind of guy. And this right here, I believe is just your standard Pacman. So like it lists every single software package and it gives you the option to update it and all that, which if you all ever want to come and see these like up here afterwards, that's more than fine. Now the one I love is GNOME. Big hulking icons that you know exactly what this is and what you're installing. It's really simple and all of that. So package manager, it is your choice what you want to do with it. And what GUI? Well, there is only one GUI that is not supported in Arch right now, and that is called OpenBox. OpenBox is the only one that is not supported, but everything else is. This is XFCE. As you can tell, it's sort of like a Mac feel. You get a bar at the bottom. By default, you can disable it if you want. But it's a lighter weight GUI. It has very, very limited apps installed with it. This is GNOME. Also, they all kind of are similar to Mac and how they work. Like you have like your favorites bar on the side. I'm pretty sure if you've ever worked with Ubuntu, which I'm pretty sure you have. Maybe of course you have. And of course you can click this button here. It brings up all your apps and it's more 3D, and more cool graphics. Up here is called Mate. No, KDE. This is KDE, which is the system that I'm using. And just to give you a better look at what KDE is like. Of course, it has to go to sleep on me. So KDE is like your standard Windows. You have like your you have like your favorites application. Unfortunately, I can't move this to the side, but you have like your favorites, all of your applications. So like if you want to have all the apps installed, go to computer, like in Windows, your home folder. You have like your file manager right here instead of having to open like File Explorer in Windows. But it's very, very similar to Windows and how you would work for it. You can put shortcuts out here. So I chose KDE because it's really easy to install. And to install a GUI, it's actually very simple. Whenever you are in your terminal, because you don't have a GUI yet, you're going to have to put in a command. Well, that's pretty easy. For installing packages, you have Pacman by default. And how many times have I said that? You have Pacman by default. So to install a package from Pacman, this is all you need to do, is Pacman / and then a capital S to install something. And then, like for a GUI, so to install KDE, I went to KDE's website, and they had the name of how to the package name. And all you would put in is the package name. So to install KDE and all that comes with it, this was what their website said. And if you want to find something, all you have to do is go to their website, and they have a list of what their name is. I go for a Pacman repository, we're called this. And that's what you would enter whenever you install it. And that will install it by default. And then whenever you reboot, it 99% of the time will reboot into the GUI. And of course, if you don't add a user, it won't be there yet. So you want to make sure you want to follow the pre-install steps. Now for updates, and this is going to kind of be the last thing that I do, for updating Arch, it's actually extremely easy. In Ubuntu, you have to do like sudo apt update, then upgrade. Arch is actually pretty simple. Now, to make it not take so long, I went ahead and updated, but I'm going to show you what the process is so it won't be like downloading packages and taking up time. So, like with installing packages, actually I should use sudo with it. So like with installing packages, you're going to do Pacman, but instead of S. So S by itself means to install something. Like you're going to go out and get it from the repository. To update, Arch uses a different way of saying update. What they use a command called /s, but instead of just an S, like install a package, you're going to do SYYU. That means synchronize. It stands for synchronize your packages. So whatever packages are in the repository, make it up to date. And so I'm going to put that in, and right now it's looking at all of the databases, and it's going to go through each and every one of them. And since I updated it, it didn't need to update anything, but that's what it would do. And then if it found anything, it would ask, do you want to upgrade this? And you would type Y for yes, and it would do the upgrade just like in Ubuntu or any other Linux operating system. I think it's a lot easier, and I like how efficient that it is, because it'll automatically sync up everything for you. Now I wanted to demonstrate installing a package. So, I believe Chromium should be, nope, sudo. Always gotta do sudo. And not install Pacman. I think Chromium should be in the repository by default. Chromium is a web browser. It's just a free version. It's the open source version of Chrome, but without the data tracking and stuff like that. And that's going to be going here. Now, in case it took too long, I went ahead and actually will go ahead and show off an install program like it said to do. I did install Firefox. Firefox does not come installed by default. So I actually did install Firefox, just so if this took too long and not to waste time, and just to show that in a working application that I did. And here is Firefox. And it is working up to date and everything, and I will not enter my email. And it is, it did install, so let me check and see. Applications, if I go to internet, and, it's updated now. Oh, it had to update it. And there's Chromium, the Chromium web browser. Let me open that real fast, make sure it works. And Chromium is working. Now, and of course, I'm pretty sure you all like a GUI package manager. I am very, very partial to Terminal. However, if you are sort of like the kind of person that I don't know the exact name of every package that I want, well then you can install a GUI package manager, and that's where I'm going to be referencing. I'm going to be going to this. So it's basically to finish up. If you have any questions, which I'm pretty sure a lot of this was over your head, I understand, it was for me too. This little website right here, it's very tiny, it's only got about several thousand pages to go over. The Arch Wiki is filled with everything. If you want to look up how to install GUIs, because I could not cover everything that I wanted to do about Arch, to be honest, because there is just so many packages and things that you can do, and things that are not done for you. You have to do everything, pretty much everything yourself. The Arch Linux Wiki has everything that you need to do, and so that was literally the last slide that I had on here, was basically saying, use the Arch Wiki if you ever want to use Arch. I mean, you can watch tutorials online, but the Arch Wiki actually has a really, really cool install page that I followed without watching a YouTube tutorial, and the commands that I listed up here were all here. So if you look here, it'll actually tell you, so to do this, you would go to this file and add whatever. Or to ping to the internet, here's how you would ping to the internet, how to set your time clock. And I literally just followed every command there. So it's pretty daunting at first, but when you actually look up, they do provide every command that I used up here and list out, okay, if you're to make this, you're gonna edit this file. And if you know how to use Nano, which I didn't before, but now I do extremely well, then you can do anything during the installation and follow it without having to watch a 1 hour tutorial. By following this, I think the fastest install I ever did was about 9 minutes after looking through this and failing a lot. But that is all I have on Arch. I know it was a lot, and there's even more I could have went over. But so, do we have any questions? Sure.
I have several.
Yeah.
But I want to give anyone else an opportunity before I start.
Yeah.
You made mention that most operating systems are built in C and C++. Do you know why?
C is a very low-level programming language, and that's why it's used in Arch a lot, or actually in most Linux distros. For a lot of the base level code that goes around the kernel, it's made in C and C++. And then for applications, a lot of applications in Arch are programmed using Python, surprisingly. It's actually Python.
Okay. You did a good job explaining what a bootloader is, but can you show how you installed a bootloader?
Yeah.
We all know that a bootloader gives us a program that gives us the option to pick whatever operating system. And sometimes when you dual boot, it does it automatically, and whatever operating system you want throws it in place. But what did you do?
I'll show the install command, and then I'll actually get out of the system and show you what the bootloader will look like.
Okay, that would be great.
So to install the bootloader, the most common bootloader ever used, especially for Linux, it works very well, is Grub. And so I think, in fact, just to give a reference, it says down here at the very end, for bootloaders, it'll actually give you a bunch of categories that you can choose to install from. Now, there are a lot there, but to be honest, you don't need all of them. Grub is just a standard one that I like to use and most other Linux users. To install, it's the same as installing a package. It is in Pacman by default.
Could you pause just a minute? Go back to that screen where the list was of the operating, or the Grub. Read some of those so that we hear some of the different bootloader names, please.
Clover is a bootloader for bootloading a lot of virtual machines, especially on servers. It's used in Proxmox a lot. Shout out. Grub, of course. You then have Grub Legacy. The current version of Grub is 2.2. Basically, what Grub Legacy is older versions of Grub. So if you put Legacy on there, it'll then ask you, oh, well, which version do you want? And then Refined is a bootloader. I think it installs to your motherboard itself. It's a very tiny bootloader. It can actually go onto a motherboard. Though, of course, the problem is a lot of consumer boards don't let you do that. But like server grade stuff, you can actually put this on your motherboard itself and like overwrite a bootloader on your motherboard, which is kind of cool, I found out. Yeah, those are the.
I was just familiar, I'm familiar with Lilo, it's on their Linux load, Lilo. And then make sure you know that Windows has their own bootloader as well, but they don't really tell you a whole lot about boot rec and boot recovery, and they have a boot initializer. They don't give it a fancy name that you know of, so, okay, go ahead.
And to install a bootloader by Arch is like any other package. So to literally install Grub, I would just type out pacman install and then Grub. Now, on the newer versions of Arch, I'm running an older Arch version. Arch did sort of change a little bit recently where you can't just install that and then reboot and oh, you have a bootloader now. You actually have to generate a file, and this is so new, like it came out like last month, and so I just found this out. So it's no longer as easy as just installing Grub, and to be honest, I didn't know what command it was because it just happened. But it is on, if you go to Grub, it actually lists out like how to install Grub, like all through here. Just like with the Arch Wiki, it gives you the command. But yeah, but this is it right here. I don't know if you can see that, but you have to give it a target to install to. So it's no longer, you can't just install it and reboot and it's operating. You actually have to tell it where you want it to go. Like a Grub, well, what CDs am I working with here? And you actually have to give it the name of your hard drive. And so that's something that's a little bit new, and I kind of don't know why. Maybe some people were having issues with that, because it's always worked for me in the past. But but to show what a bootloader actually looks like, I'm just going to close this and then boot it back up, and so and show kind of what Grub looks like. It's very, very simplistic. So this right here is your bootloader. If I had multiple operating systems on here, it would say Windows drive or Mac, or if I had a Mac and did a Hackintosh, it should be Mac or whatever. Now I have it set for it to automatically boot into whichever one I have set. But as you saw, it had two options: advanced options for my Arch, and you just boot into Arch Linux.
Did you have to do any configuration on the Grub file to make that happen?
Yes, I did. I had to
Can you show
follow.
us that?
I had to follow the steps. It was, where is it at? I didn't modify the actual file itself. I gave it the command to generate a file. That is another way you can do this. Let me get my terminal off real quick. Now, I can't operate the command because I don't want to break it, because I already have a Grub set in place, but I will list out the quote. I'll just write it for you guys. It's easier every time. So Grub, so like with this, where you have to install it to, you have to generate a Grub boot file. To do that, you do Grub for Arch Linux. I don't know if it's different for other systems, but Arch, it was install, Grub/install. I believe it was DFS, I believe was the command. /DFS, and then your drive name. I believe that was the command that I gave it to generate a file, because I installed it properly, it still didn't boot properly. So you have to say, well, so you actually have to map out, like install it to that drive, and this drive is primary, it's what you're going to be booting from. And
This is where you're going to find it.
yeah, and then it generates it. It's very, very quick.
Do you have a file you can look at? Or
I'll be honest, I never really had to look at it.
Is it just detecting that you have the two operating systems? Because in some places you get to tell it, hey, I've loaded this, and over here I've loaded this, and
I know that for-
it didn't have you manipulate the file.
Yeah, it didn't have me do it, because when I installed Grub, it didn't have anything. So it more than likely did, I just never had to use it or modify it, but that just generates it. And so it'll read for that whenever it boots and like, oh, here's an option that you can have.
Well, and grub is one of those words, if you don't know what it means and what it represents, grub does not give you a lot of contextual detail to know that that's what it is. That is a bootloader. You're like, why would you name it grub? I don't know. Okay. Why is there so many differences in file systems? You said there were a lot you could choose from here. Why?
Well, there are different ones, like extended is, EXT 1, 2, and 3, and 4 are, to be honest, they're pretty much all the same. They follow the same pattern, it's all block type, and they aren't dynamic at all. So basically, like on like a file structure, you have a set number, like your hard drive is split into different blocks, sort of like how we went over in packaging and all that kind of stuff. And so EXT is really, is kind of good if you don't want your drive to get errored when it's reformatting or when it's expanding or shrinking. You just want like, here's what you got, you use what you got. But it can also be very inefficient that way. But also the cool thing is that it's not only that you can install those file systems, it can also read them. Which is pretty nice if you're troubleshooting and you want to just boot like a live USB to check things. In fact, Arch is really good for that. If you want to just boot a live USB, all you get is a terminal. When you boot into Arch, this is all you get the first time you boot into it. But you can run CF disk on like another computer and know what file system it has. You can even format hard drives or link hard drives to somewhere else by using Arch. And I think that's one of the cool things about it.
I was just thinking that one of them was named like J something FS, but like it journals, it keeps a little log for itself. I think you need to walk away understanding that not every file system has all the features of every other file system. And they don't set up and handle their files precisely the same, which is part of why we have incompatibility issues from time to time.
Because I know also you could play off of that for file managing. I know that so it's like FAT file systems are, it's like the FAT file system, whenever you're working with it, it can't be converted to ext4 right away. So you have to actually like do a full conversion of it. Yeah, so they don't play well together all the time, but you have options.
Yeah, are you able to get on the internet and look up BTRFS? Do you remember what it stands for? You said you didn't know that one.
I actually did not know that one.
If I remember, I don't want to call it the wrong title, but it seemed like it was,
I think it's resizing. You have to have this file system based on a copy and write principle.
what's its name?
It's designed by Oracle, surprisingly. BTRFS.
Is it called BRTFS or is it something?
Yeah, BTRFS. I'll pronounce this. Pronounce this Butterfuss, BetterFS. That's really awkward. That's all.
Okay.
But it's actually used by Oracle, Red Hat, Facebook even uses it.
Just sounded like I was thinking it was also like a V-tree search. It was based on a different searching algorithm, so that's how they come up with some of the names and what it does inside. So file systems are critical for you to understand. Don't just look at the differences in the name, look at the differences in the features. And even though you don't touch it all the time, it does make a difference, so. All right. Well, I think that's my question. Anybody else?
Yeah.
How do you give root privileges to like a user?
Oh, that was, I apologize for skipping over that. So the user does not have root privileges by default, as with most Linux operating systems. You have to enable that. Yeah, I totally forgot. Thanks for reminding me about that, because that's a question as well. Now, so to edit, there's a text file, and I'm going to show you said text file on the screen. It's called sudoers. I mean, I've mentioned it before in class, but to modify it, basically you would go, once again, using Nano, your best buddy here, you would go to your sudoers file, and sudoers, like every other file to modify, is in the Etsy folder. And I have to get mine. And so you would go to your Etsy folder, and you have all this text that means absolutely nothing, at least to you. But what's really cool, and I didn't know this, all of your groups are here too. So different groups, they'll have the name of the group, like this is called Wheel Group, and your name will be there if you add it to using the user mod. So to add root privileges, so as you can see, you have root all equals all, it's all. And basically that means that root has the ability to do everything. Now you can modify this, but I've never had to really do that. But to give access the same as like the tester here, I listed out my username and then all. All equals, in parentheses, all actions, all access granted. I think it's like 3 different things that all stands for. It's like all files, all this, and I think all permissions is what those 3 groups are. And after you type that, you would just Control X to save it, and you would reboot. And now you can use sudo, the command sudo, and to get access to anything you need to do. Thanks for reminding me about that. Any other questions? Especially if I didn't mention anything, and if it's on the 10 questions, I believe I covered everything that was supposed to be on the 10 questions. We all good? Do we want to go over the questions?
I would think you would.
Real quick.
I think that would be a great plan.
So I'm just gonna kind of ask if you all coming back. I mean, is everyone pretty much done? Yeah. Okay, everyone pretty much set up. So number 1. So what is the default package manager for Arch? Pacman. Good. Okay, and this one's pretty easy. How do you give root privileges to the user?
Well, I think you.
Yeah, the sudoers file. You have to modify the sudoers file. Now, is Arch a rolling release or a standard release?
Rolling.
Who created Arch, and in what year was it released?
I've been in 2002.
Good, awesome. And now on yeah. So what is what default? So what is the network manager that comes with Arch?
Network manager is not one.
Yes. That was a true question. You have the option to install it, but it does not come by default. Trick on there. I was wondering how well that would do. Okay, so it's multiple choice. So which of the following GUIs is not available? Open box. Good. And so which of these which of the following process managers does Arch have installed by default? Now, true or false? Arch Linux uses KDE as its default GUI. Good. Well, without the network manager, you must use the DHCP-CD command in the terminal to get an IP address. True. Good. And then finally, to modify themes or configurations in Arch, you need to edit the /etc folder. True. Awesome.
Second.
Yes, and that is it for.
Well, let's give Mr. Yeagerlinder a big hand. Thank you. Before we walk out of here, let's talk about a couple of things. He's set the standard pretty high, don't you think?
Sorry.
Sorry, way to go, Brian.
Presentation standard, okay?